First, I've had a chance to kind of get a little bit of orientation to what you guys are doing. I just wanted to briefly say, very well done. It's such incredible stuff. You guys knock all of our socks off with what you're doing as high schoolers. Yeah, I expect a lot to come out of this group. And with that, I will go ahead and introduce Miss Catherine Coleman Flowers. As Brad mentioned, the event I've been planning focuses on clean water and sanitation, as well as public health and well-being in the Alabama Black Belt region. And so I've read her book also, and so she's come up in a lot of my discussions here lately. And so yeah, Miss Flowers is the founder of the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, or CREEJ, an organization that she founded which seeks the implementation of best practices to address the reduction of health and economic disparities. Again, big things in the Black Belt region, improve access to clean air, water, and soil in marginalized, specifically rural communities by influencing policy, inspiring innovation, catalyzing relevant research, and amplifying the voices of community leaders. We understand that, especially in our rural communities, that can be a challenge. And this is done within the context of climate change and through the lens of environmental justice. And so very, very admirable work. She's a member of the board of directors for the Climate Reality Project and the Natural Resources Defense Council in RDC. And she is employed as the Rural Development Manager for the Equal Justice Initiative. And so that's Brian Stevenson's organization that got a lot of popularity last year with the new movie that came out. And as I alluded to, she is the author of a book titled Waste. And I'm assuming most of you guys are familiar because it's my understanding that you guys had that as a reading as part of your experience with Stockholm Junior Water Prize. And she's a 2020, it's a longer resume, she's a 2020 MacArthur Fellow. And so congratulations on that recent award and recognition for all of your work. And I don't have it in my bio I have in front of me, but I wanted to also highlight a recent appointment that our team saw news about. And so she's also on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And so that's also a newer accomplishment. And so again, congratulations for that. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Ms. Flowers, to further introduce yourself and to go through this Q&A portion of the program.
Thank you, Anniestacia, and thank you for those of you with the Water Environment Federation and the Stockholm Junior Water Prize. I've heard a lot about this through an associate of mine, Kartik Chandran. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. From my perspective today, I think what I like to talk about is my work and how I have been engaged in the issues not only in the Black Belt, but what I'm seeing across the country is not just a Black Belt problem. And there's some structural issues, I think, that have defied a lot of the approaches that are currently being used that will only reinforce the historical inequities that are baked within our system. And as we talked about diversity and inclusion, especially as it relates to environmental justice, we have to also look at the way we have been trained sometimes help to create these inequities and reinforce them instead of change them. And I think a very good example is what is happening in the Black Belt. I'm a native of Lowndes County, Alabama. I grew up there. In my house, we didn't have a bathroom at all. We had an outdoor toilet, and then we went from there to a cesspool and from there to a septic tank. And the septic tank was coming back into the home, and we thought it was a wastewater. We thought it was a plumbing issue. And it was only after we went to over 2,000 houses in Lowndes County going from door to door, because we had been told by people who were supposed to be helping us at the time that I documented in the book who they were, that the problem was that the people didn't know how to maintain the systems that were in place. And we were also told that the problem was they couldn't afford septic systems. But we found out the problem was deeper than that. We went from house to house, we found septic systems that were failing. When we did our parasite study, the people that had the highest amount of hookworm in their system were the people that had failing wastewater treatment systems that were either coming into their house and coming into their yards. So it became clear to us that part of the problem is the technology. And the one reason why we're going to continue to have these problems is because the current engineering paradigm is not set up to go into the communities to actually find out what the real problem is so that it can be part of coming up with solutions that can potentially work. So, but I'm not finding that just in Lowndes County and the Black Belt. Finding it in other places too. Uniontown, the people in Uniontown are calling me complaining about the same thing because they're being forced by government entities and also by prominent engineering firms to sign on to solutions that they know are not working. And that's just totally against the principles of environmental justice. We're actually engaged in a year-long project with The Guardian where we're documenting wastewater problems across the US. And one of the things that we have found as we document these problems and people are coming forward, it's not just a rural problem. We're finding this in urban communities too, where people have engineered systems that are not working and failed. And a lot of these engineered systems that they have generally only go in Black or poor communities. They will not put these same systems anywhere else. And as a result, the people are, and when they fail, they're being told that it's failing because they're uneducated. And that's not right. I just got a call recently from someone in public health at the University of Pittsburgh who called me in because there's a parish in Louisiana where they have an aerobic system that is not working properly. But what they have done, they brought in a government entity and their assessment was, without asking any of the people in the community, they probably just went to the people that engineered the system who are not living in the community and actually asked them what the problem. They said, well, the people don't know how to maintain it, so they they decided they're gonna contract with a local university and develop a program to so-called educate the people in the community, and they are resisting them. They don't want to listen to them. And I asked the question, have y'all asked the people in the community what the problem? And they said no. I said, but you can come in and tell them that they're uneducated and they don't know how it functions, and that's the reason why it's failing, but you're not the one living in the community. There's no real community engagement. But what a lot of people are doing is going finding somebody to support whatever theory they have and putting them out front and setting themselves up for failure, because we went through this before. We did this in the early 2000s when I was with the center with the Bob Woodson and his group, because some of the same people that are pushing solutions now were pushing those same solutions to us, install systems that failed. And here we are again. So what we're doing with the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, we're actually collecting data. There's no central database in the United States that talks about wastewater failures. And with our year-long project with The Guardian, we're asking people to self-report. To self-report, one, whether or not they have wastewater treatment at all. And two, to self-report if they're on a system, a self-contained or an on-site system that's failing. And then three, if they're part of a large system that's also failing. And it's been interesting what we have found. Our first two stories have made lots of it's gotten lots of attention. One was in Illinois, outside of St. Louis, but we found out that throughout Illinois, they have problems with wastewater treatment because people are putting in place the same systems, and these systems are failing. And a lot of these are big pipe systems that are failing. I saw streets caving in. I saw more raw sewage in Centerville, Illinois, than I saw in Lowndes County that was on the ground. And these people are paying a wastewater treatment fee. These are failed systems and nobody's taking the responsibility for that. The same thing is happening in Mount Vernon, New York. Westchester County is one of the wealthiest counties in New York, probably one of the wealthiest counties in the United States. But again, a Black community where the systems is failing. One woman there who shared her story said that there is so much poop coming back into her house that her grandchildren call it the poop house. There are people that actually have to move out and move to another side of town so that they can be, not Mount Vernon, move to another area where they can have adequate wastewater treatment. What we found in this is that there's a racial disparity that goes along with this. But the people that generally bring that try to bring the so-called solution are not the people in the community. These are generally people that don't live in the community, don't understand the problem, don't really ask what the problem is, but they see the opportunity to make money. To me, I call them the ambulance chasers. Now we got the ambulance chasers of wastewater treatment that are following everything I do and try to go to these communities to propose solutions, but haven't done the work it takes to come up with sustainable solutions so that we won't be doing this again 4 or 5 years from now, because most of these systems fail within 2 years. So as a result, we are, one, documenting the issues across the country. The second thing that we're doing is that we're actually working with collaborators and trying to find new technologies. We're going to get ahead of the game because everybody else is putting in place technology that we already know is going to fail because we lived through that. And in places like Montgomery, Alabama, where there are people in the city of Montgomery that are on, that should be getting wastewater treatment, that are not getting it in their own septic tanks. These are the Black communities in Montgomery. One of them is one of the oldest Black communities in Montgomery, within 500 feet of a sewer main, but yet they're not connected. And when we talk with the people from the Water and Sewer Board, their position is, we're not doing this because we're going to choose the cheapest possible solution. That sounds like Flint, Michigan to me. And in Flint, Michigan, they chose the cheapest possible solution and got lead in the water. And likewise, what we're seeing is people are choosing cheap solutions, but they're making a big profit off of it. And as a result, they're putting in place systems that we know are not going to work. And at the end of the day, the public health suffers. And if COVID has not taught us anything, it should teach us in the state that we're in that has the lowest vaccination rate, in one of the lowest, I think the only one lower than us is probably maybe Mississippi, but one of the lowest vaccination rates in the US, but one of the Lowndes County itself had the highest per capita COVID infection and death rates in the state. One of the persons I was working with, Pamela Rush, died before we can put in place a $28,000 septic system where she lives that was going to take up most 2/3 of the half-acre property that she had there. And this is a person that was living off less than $1,000 a month. And these are the inequities that are baked into our system. And hopefully what we can do is, using the lenses of environmental justice, we have to make, first of all, change the engineering paradigm. The engineering paradigm should include people from the colonials that are dealing with problems sitting at the table with the engineers drafting the solutions. It shouldn't be somebody that they handpick that's going to parrot everything they say and not reflect what's actually going on in the community. We also need to look at the role that racial covenants have played in terms of who gets resilient wastewater infrastructure and who gets the cheap infrastructure that we know is not going to last. We also need to look at climate change and climate justice. And we know that with the water tables rising, and there are people, everybody's looking at Lowndes County, but they're not looking at the people that call me in Mobile and Baldwin County who have failing septic systems too, or the people in Florida with failing septic systems too, or the people in other parts, North and South Carolina, Georgia. There are places throughout the United States where they're failing. I have a master's degree in history, and part of earning that master's degree, I had to actually take classes on environmental health. And when I went went back and looked at some of my books that I had to read about environmental science and so forth, I saw that there have been at least 2 of them where they were talking about failing septic systems 20 years ago. But that is what we want to always put in Black communities. And here in Montgomery is a great example of that. This is the capital of the state. However, in the Black communities, that's what you see. They want to put the cheap infrastructure there, but we have seen that to be the case across the country. But not only in Black communities, in communities like in Appalachia, in Martin County, Kentucky, for an example, same problem. They're putting in place failed infrastructure. But as young people, you can think out of the box. I think we have to think out of the box when we talk about solutions. We can't talk about something that worked 20 years ago and is not working now, disavowing the fact that because of sea level rise, we have rising water tables. In Lowndes County, I've seen places where along Highway 80, where they dug and did a perk test, went down 6 inches and struck water. On Pamela Rush's property, they went down 25 inches and struck water. In an area here in Montgomery that we recently went to, a woman is in her 70s, been in the house for 17 years. The septic system has failed. when they came to look at a septic system, they broke the lid on it so you can look right down into it. And I actually went there with some reporters from Italy who were the counterparts of they were like the PBS counterparts in Italy. And when they saw that, they were like shocked. Everybody that come from around the world and see what they see in the United States is shocked by this, because they cannot see why this was not addressed by the government a long time ago, not criminalizing and penalizing people to force them into the closet where they don't talk about these problems so that we can find solutions. I'm even talking to people in the state of Maryland, for an example, who are talking about the same issues there that we have here. It's in Virginia. You know, I talked about New York State. When I testified before Congress, Congressman Delgado talked about his district being the most rural in New York, and people in New York have contacted me because they have failing wastewater treatment systems, on-site systems as well, not just the big pipe systems. So we have to think out of the box. And one of the things that we're doing, we're looking at the fact that, you know, in Lowndes County, you know, I'm a storyteller because I love where I'm from. And one of the things that we learned how to do was how to live with the land and be resilient. I think we were among the first environmentalists, although we don't get credit for that. And in my experience as a child, we learned how to, Miss Neal had a well down the road from us, and people would go there and they would prime that pump because she had a manual pump, and they would actually pump water, put it into the buckets and take it to their homes and use it, but grow the best gardens that I probably have seen since that time. I think that one reason that I'm so healthy now because I ate the food from those gardens that grew out of the land in Lowndes County. But I also know a story of some of you, if you're basketball fans, one of the famous people from Lowndes County is a basketball player named Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace's sister, Stephanie, works with me. And Stephanie has worked with me from the very beginning, seeing a lot of these problems firsthand. And one of the things that she shared with me recently was there is and this story I think kind of illustrates what I'm talking about and why we need young people involved in changing this paradigm. She told me that her brother works on a farm. He has a high school diploma. The farmer is a big farmer. The farmer sent all of his children to Auburn University to be trained in how to run the farm. But if her brother didn't go to work, they couldn't run the farm because he was there all the time. He learned by doing, actually being there on the job. When the tractor stopped working there at the farm, her brother was able to fabricate parts to keep the parts running on the tractors that were over 25 years old because they're not making those parts anymore. It reminds me of Cuba, from what I'm told that when people go to Cuba, they see older cars because of the embargo that kept them from getting newer cars. So people came up with ways to keep it running. We're going to need that type of ingenuity from people that are living on these failed septic tanks who've experienced it coming back into their home and sitting down at the table with engineers that are open-minded enough to know that they have some knowledge. They have some knowledge that can help them find the solutions. I would not have received the MacArthur Award had I not listened to people in Lowndes County that did not have degrees. People that were willing to share new knowledge with me, because the way the knowledge that's being documented now is to back up old theories that simply don't work anymore, and certainly don't work in areas like that. So I think it's important for us to look at what is happening in other places. How do they treat wastewater in outer space? How do they treat wastewater on these ships? I know they're not just dumping it into the ocean. How do they treat it on a submarine? We can learn from those things. I want you to know that there's a person whose father was there's a movie that came out recently about the Black Panther Party. The original Black Panther Party actually started in Lowndes County. There's a person who is a MIT trained engineer from Lowndes County who actually developed a device to help propel the space shuttle. And I'm inspired by him. And he went to the same high school I went to in Lowndes County. We had mediocre education, but we did what we could with it. And now he's a person who has patents in his name. And I'm a MacArthur fellow who just received an honorary doctorate in science from Wesleyan University. So there's something to be said about local knowledge, and it should be valued in such a way that we can find some real solutions. So I'm in conversation right now with with a senator's office about a bill that's going to be proposed tomorrow to put in place wastewater treatment in rural communities where people don't have it. And what I said to them, my concern about the bill is that there's too much influence from the industry and not enough influence from people that are living in the communities. I believe if you believe that much in whatever you're creating, you should be able to warranty it for at least 10 years. That means a service warranty and a warranty on the parts. What is happening when they build these wastewater systems, they're putting these systems in people's homes, like in Whitehall right now, and they're transferring the liability to the homeowner. There's no liability at all for the installers or the manufacturers. And I've been in conversations, I actually walked away from a meeting with the manufacturers because they don't want any warranties at all. I know, because I'm a homeowner, that I would not buy a house that they did not warranty my HVAC system, if they don't warranty my, I have a tankless water heater that's made by Ring. When the parts went out on it, 5 years into it, they replaced it. I didn't have to pay anything. Why don't we allow those same type of criteria for wastewater treatment, where the public health is at stake here? And I shouldn't be the only one pushing for this. But what I found out, and fortunately I've gotten NRDC involved, and I've also gotten Earth Justice involved. And I think we may have to look at some potential legal action to force people to do the right thing, because the people that are suffering are people of color. And even in my case, a year ago, and this is different, but it's just to illustrate what I'm talking about, while we're having these discussions about diversity and equity. I went to the hospital February 17th to have surgery. I was dismissed from the hospital on the 18th. I was in pain the entire time, and I called the doctor's office and I said, I need something for pain, because they gave me like 4 or 5 painkillers. I guess they thought I would become an addict if they gave me more. They told me to take Tylenol extra strength. I realized that at night when I was sleeping, my teeth were chattering. I was freezing to death and I didn't know why. I finally ended up asking somebody to go and get a new thermometer for me, and I checked my temperature, it was like 103. I went back to the hospital I was released on a Tuesday morning. I went back on a Sunday morning. I had pneumonia. I had developed pneumonia because the doctor cut the vein to my spleen and sent me home and did not tell me. And even when I went back to the hospital and he wanted to do the surgery, they didn't even give me a position. I wasn't put in. The only other choice they gave me was a doctor that had performed surgery on a friend of mine who died on the table. So here I was at their mercy, a Black woman that they didn't listen to when I told them I was in pain, when I told them I wasn't feeling well, and they told me to take Tylenol extra strength. And this was in March. This was February of last year. I ended up, my family came, it got to the point that my family they advocated for me, my family and friends, they sat in my room with me, they documented every time somebody came there, every time they gave me something. And they even, one of my associates, friends who was an associate, became an associate because she was a Georgetown educated attorney from EJI, came there. He basically said to my family, you all need to be careful about what you do, because she's still in our care. And from that point, when I found out that he had cut the vein to my spleen and I was bleeding internally, which is why I had pneumonia. And I had to have surgery again where my spleen had to be taken. I didn't have a choice, but I had to trust this same doctor to do it again. But fortunately, there were enough eyes on him, and there were people like Reverend William Barber and Al Gore that were sending flowers to my to my hospital room, that they knew that they were being watched and they had to do it right this time. And consequently, I ended up being in the hospital until the 5th of March of last year. And I was discharged from the hospital 2 weeks before the governor shut the state down for COVID. And I ended up really having to recover at home by myself. But all the work I've done, because I'm committed to this, down to getting a call from Bernie Sanders telling me I was asking me to serve on the Biden Climate Unity Task Force, I said yes, and I did it. And I was able to meet people like Gina McCarthy, who's now in charge of the climate policy for the Biden White House, to talk about environmental justice, which became part of Biden's platform. And I had never heard environmental justice mentioned at any political convention before, as many times as I heard at the Democratic convention last year. And then from that, seeing that the policies that we proposed, that Gina McCarthy, Kerry Dugan, and I proposed as part of the EJ arm of this task force, actually being enacted into law, down to the WEJAC and the executive order on that dealt with environmental justice. I'm saying all this to say, young people, it doesn't. If you commit yourself, and if you're dedicated and you're persistent, even when people don't hear what you're saying at the time, if you feel like you're crying in the wilderness, like I have felt like for so many years until now, look at what I was able to accomplish from my kitchen table. Because everything I did in the last year has been from my kitchen table. And when I go to Birmingham tonight to go to the doctor tomorrow, will be the first time I've seen a doctor since I left, since my staples were taken out March the 13th of last year. So I have faith in young people. And I believe that this is the beginning of finding long-term solutions for how we address wastewater, not only in the Black Belt, because the Black Belt is not the only place that has the problem. It's just because of the work that we're doing, a lot of the focus is on the Black Belt. But I ask you to look in your own communities, look around and see where there are problems. I also ask you to get in touch with us. I'm available. I always respond to young people because that's why I'm on Instagram. I get messages on Instagram from young people. I get messages through Twitter. I get messages through Facebook. If you reach out to me, I'll respond to you, especially if you are a young person, because I think somewhere in your mind, you hold the key to how we're going to deal with and get out of this mess that we've put ourselves in, where we have developed an economy that destroys our planet and kills people. We don't have to live that way. And I think that you hold a key to that. And all the work that I do, and if you read my book, and in the end, I talk about the 7th generation principle. When I went to Standing Rock, when they were protesting because of the water, they were building a pipeline under their water source. One of the things I learned from my indigenous brothers and sisters was the 7th generation principle. And I know my father, and I'm finding out now as I learn about my own ancestry, which was also indigenous, but also Nigerian, that I'm finding that there's a lot of relationships and kinship between indigenous customs and cultures. And all of us talk about generations to come, but the 7th generation principle is that whatever we do, we have to do it in such a way that is going to influence the 7th generation. So that means that if you can't, in your right mind, put in place a septic system that can't last more than 5 years, don't do it. Because at the end of the day, when it comes into people's homes, another Catherine Flowers will come around and actually do a study that people will participate in, and they'll find out that those people are getting hookworm and other tropical parasites too. We have to stop this. And the way we do this is change this paradigm, include and look at the principles of environmental justice, and care about people more than we care about profit. Thank you.
So beautifully said. And I've been taking a lot of notes too, a lot of points you hit on. They hit close to home. I think, I mentioned that event that we've been organizing. It's been so neat hearing the conversations. And I really do get that feeling that, like you said, that we need the innovation. I get the feeling that we have a generation now that's wanting to innovate and that honestly really cares about this issue. And so a major credit to you for rising awareness. It's been a thing for a long time, but I'm really grateful that we're starting to talk about it, especially at the rural level, because I think urban became popular with Flint, but these rural issues are kind of coming up to the point where I've, even through this process, realized, like you mentioned, Baldwin County, that's where I live. I realized we have that here a lot more than I realized. And so many people on our organizing team, they would talk about, oh yeah, I'm from Kansas and we have it here. And we're all kind of like, yeah, taken aback for sure. But thank you so much again. That was beautifully said. And with that, I will open it up for questions. Really hoping to get some questions, especially from our high school students. We would also welcome questions from our judges as well. I'm sure that there's a lot that's on people's minds after all that. Really good discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let me start out. You know, environmental justice is such an important concept. And we really don't educate people on what environmental justice is. And all of the things that have happened locating industries, it's not just waste treatment or anything like that, but locating industries in areas that are poor, and it could be white or black, but poor areas. And so environmental justice is something that needs to be advocated. And I know, Catherine, that you're advocating for it. What do you suggest might be important for young people, for the students, the high school students that are on this call, to learn more about environmental justice, what it means, and how we can advocate for it?
Well, I think first of all, in most communities, most states anyway, and a lot of college campuses have environmental justice organizations. Uh, Find an environmental justice organization to volunteer or cause that you support. Find out which environmental justice issues are close to you, because they're in all 50 states. They're not just in one area. We're also, I think the other thing that can happen, there are organizations like the Sunrise Movement that really organize young people, including high school students, that you can probably become a part of. When I served on the Biden Sanders Unity Task Force, I served with Varshini Prakash, who's one of the organizers of the Sunrise Movement. Uh, and I know that Sunrise Movement, they were just recently marching down in Cancer Alley in Louisiana. And these are young people. One of the young people that's serving on the WEJAC with me, the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, is Jerome Foster, as a high school student, like Greta, that everybody knows about, but Greta Thunberg. He actually went and protests about climate change in front of the White House every day and got the attention of a lot of people, and is now the youngest person. He's a freshman in college now, but he's the youngest person serving on the WEJAC. So there are people like Zena Batista, who is now getting ready to join me. She's a high school student, 17 years old. When Greta came to the U.S., she was the one that met her in New York, dockside, when she came here over a year ago. And she's 17, and I recommended that she serve with the American Academy of Arts and Sciences as a commission on accelerating climate change action. And I recommended her to serve on that commission, and she has accepted as a high school student. So you're never too young to get involved. So especially as it relates to environmental justice, I think my book is just one example of what you can read, but there are other books that are out there now on environmental justice. All you have to do is go and Google environmental justice books and find something that I think that, and I don't want to recommend just any particular books because it depends on your interest level, what you can read about it, but certainly finding issues in your communities where there are either dirty plants that are sited there, as it is in Cancer Alley, that are polluting the air and water. Or you can look at, if you're in California, there are issues in the Central Valley where people are having problems because the big growers are sucking the water out of the ground, and that's creating a lot of problems. I just found out an area north of Fresno, that was really a black town at one point, is having problems because the growers are growing almonds there, and it's so water intensive that there's no that people's wells are running dry as a result. So it's all of these kinds of things that I think that you can do, because there's an array of issues. And you can also follow the WEJAC. We have a website, and our meetings are public, especially during the summer while you're out of school. And look for internship opportunities. We haven't offered internship opportunities for high school students, but if the right high school students reach out to me and want to intern with me, I will gladly try to work with them, because I taught high school, and I taught junior high and high school. And actually a lot of my Facebook friends now are my former high school and junior high school students. So if you are interested, we have an internship program now where we're actually engaging young people from across the country as we collect data on sanitation issues around the country. So you can look for internships like that, or just reach out to me personally and say, Ms. Flowers, how you know, I like to get engaged and involved, and I live here. Can you help connect me with a group that I can learn more about this issue with? And I'll be glad to do that.
That's incredible. I actually am Googling that now. I think I continue to think about this event because it's kind of consumed a lot of my world here lately. But we have some students, especially like that go to Tuskegee University, Auburn, Alabama, and they're giving it their all this week. And I think that I would definitely want to highlight that internship opportunity. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I saw Ishani, it looks like you raised your hand first. And so if you wanted to go ahead with your question.
Hi, Ms. Flowers. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us. Your book was really inspiring, and your story especially. My name's Ishani, and I'm from California. And I just wanted to ask you about education regarding sanitation issues in schools. So, like you mentioned climate change when you were answering the previous question. Climate change is something that is mentioned so often. Like, I feel like it's something that is very talked about, and it's not something that we might associate with maybe third world countries or not the US. It's something that we acknowledge to be a global problem. But the same can't be said for sanitation issues. I feel like that's something we don't talk about in schools. And I'm not sure for the other contestants or finalists, but at least for me, I was very shocked because I'd never thought that this would be a problem in the US. We view the US to be a very progressive, very clean nation in comparison to many others, but that's not the case in these rural communities. And so why, I guess my question is, why is sanitation not talked about, and how could we educate today's youth about these other issues as well, in addition to things like climate change?
I think that's a great question. I don't know whether I have the complete answer, but I believe that sanitation is not talked about in this country because the shame that we associate with, I mean, in this country, we don't talk about a lot of things that we should be talking about that is so readily talked about in other countries. I attended a workshop that Dr. Carter Chandran pulled together with people from around the world talking about sanitation. And I mean, they call it what it was. I mean, there was a place, I saw a sign where it called it, they used the S word to describe it. Here we would be shocked. But I think that that's a large part of it, is that we just assume that it's been addressed. And that assumption is wrong. Or we assume that we have everything that works, and that assumption is wrong too. And it's also because it's been in rural communities that are out of sight, out of mind. And a lot of the Black communities or the poor communities that have these issues that have been fighting and have never gotten the attention before. And the only reason, and I've been fighting this for 18 years before I got attention. We only got attention when we did the parasite study. We did the parasite study, and we showed the relationship between parasites and sanitation. And The Guardian broke the story globally. Then that forced the U.S. to deal with it. And then we also had the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty to come to Alabama. When he saw it, he saw that these were conditions that generally do not exist in the developing world. And then, of course, I think the global attention that it was given gave it, it put us in a position where we can no longer ignore it. And I'm still dealing with people right now who rather, when they talk about water, they don't want to talk about sanitation, like they're not part of the same, equation here. And we're still fighting that. But I think that in schools, what should happen, I think at the very least, everybody should know their watershed. I think that should be taught to everyone, which watershed you're living in, what the source is, and also what type of contaminants could potentially be there. I think that those are the kinds of things, if we were more aware of that, I think we will be more engaged in the process. And now that I'm working with people like the Alabama Rivers Alliance, or working with national riverkeeper organizations, they see the relationship between my work and what they're trying to do. And I think that we got to get more young people engaged in that. And I'm going to be announcing something in the next, hopefully by the end of the year, that we're going to be doing with young people, high school students, because, you know, my first love was teaching high school and junior high school. And I believe that that's where we're going to get a lot of the answers. That was a great question.
That was a very great question. And thank you so much for that great answer. Again, I'm taking a lot of notes here about nice little things you have coming out. And with that, I saw Steven. I think you were second in my list. And so I'll pass it to you to ask your question.
Howdy, Ms. Flowers. I'm Steven. I'm from Texas. And my actual question focuses a bit more on the actual research side. So in your experience, do you think there should be a larger emphasis on actually developing research that is not just cheaper, but also longer lasting? Because as you said, right, there's a lot of communities that they get the actual solution, but it lasts for like 2 years, right? And after that, they have to do it again, and it's a vicious cycle. So do you think we should focus on creating that research, or actually, well, implementing our current methods? Because if we take the time to make that technology cheaper and more widespread and more long lasting, right, that would be great, and that would help millions or thousands of people. But that would also take years, and in those years, people would continue to struggle. So in your opinion, what do you think is the right balance? Would it be 50-50, or would the ratio be slightly different?
I think we can do both. I really think that we need to put the emphasis, we can do both. I think that, for an example, if it's like with cars, I mean, it's sure, you know, I always tell stories to make a point, but when the Biden administration came down and started talking about electric vehicles, look, what did the automobile industry do? I mean, things that we didn't think that would be coming out for 10 or 20 years down the road, they're coming out now, you know. You know, I can go and get a Ford F-150 probably next year that's going to be all electric. Who would have thought 4 or 5 years ago? Look at what happened with the COVID vaccine. You know, we were dealing with COVID a year ago. There was no opportunity. We didn't even know about a vaccine. We didn't know about COVID. But with a sustained effort and with research, with scientists working together to come up with a solution, I've been vaccinated, and that's why I feel comfortable going to Birmingham tomorrow and walking into a hospital and taking a test. So I think we can do both. I think we just have to have the sustained interest in doing it and putting it into research and development, because I think when people see that there's competition to improve what's there, if they want to stay in business, they'll improve too. So you're right on it. You need to be on my team.
Very, very good stuff. Thanks so much again, Stephen, for that awesome question. Yeah, I think, you know, you're talking to the community. They really, I mean, obviously research is important, but they've had a lot of research and a lot of like what Ms. Flowers said, a lot of things that were implemented but didn't last. And so they're really just they're wanting a lot of action. That's the main thing whenever we're talking to the community. It's like, we want things to happen. But
let me add, but the research that's been out there has not focused on the problem. The research has made the people the problem. It's not the people, it's the technology, and we're not dealing with it. I think that we're asking the wrong questions, and that's why we come up with the answers that we come up with. And that's why you got to keep in mind, I've been doing this for 20 years. Some of these people I've seen before, and they've been saying the same thing, and they have put in place failed systems, but they can always get money to put in place failing technologies. But if I did the same thing, I wouldn't be in business anymore. So wow. I think that that's the part that needs to change, but it's who's receiving it. And I'm finding out, if you look at the demographics, is who is receiving it. And in terms of these issues, these are global issues. Technology is failing everywhere. Technology is failing in Lagos, Nigeria. I hear from people around the world that talk about sewage coming back into their homes with sandy soils. Because we were told initially by some people from Mobile that the reason why the systems were failing in the Black Belt was because of our clay soils, but it's happening in sandy soils too. So it's not that. And that's what people are being taught. And that's what the engineers are being taught, that are going out and supposedly trying to find solutions. They'll never find a solution because they're not asking the right questions. And I think that that's the difference between what real research is versus people are researching for an industry to keep making profit as opposed to looking for some long-term solutions. And I think we can find those long-term solutions if we ask the right questions. Someone in the chat said that in Canada that they don't cover sanitation as part of the curriculum. In Canada, there are failed systems too, because I've actually been in touch with a professor from Canada that's talking about the failed systems that are there as well. This is a global issue, but this is an opportunity. We have to see it for what it is. It's an opportunity for new thinking. It's an opportunity to come up with new solutions. And it's an opportunity. I mean, one of the persons that I'm actually collaborating with is in the Netherlands, because they're having issues there too. So we have to, I think what happens is that the so-called experts that people are listening to are not really, they're experts on promoting the product that they want people to keep getting. And I need to write a book just outing those people. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to focus my time on what Stephen just said when he asked me the questions about research and technology. The action that people are talking about putting in place is going to bring raw sewage back into people's homes. I know that's getting ready to happen in the Black Belt right now. So we're going to let people try it and fail. And while they're doing that, we're going to be working on new technologies that work.
May I request a follow-up? Cool. Okay. How bad do you think the problem is? Because I know with DDT, right, that was in the 60s, I believe, there was a whole like advertising campaign of making compelling it and keeping it in the system. But of course, activists came and reversed that decision. So how far, or I guess in comparison to previous things that were promoted by companies that were correct, how bad do you think the situation is right now? I
think it's very bad. I mean, if you look at the American Society for Civil Engineering, I think they gave the American infrastructure system, what was it, a D? So, I mean, and it's probably worse than that. Those are just the ones we know about. You know, we know about the ones in the news, but I know about a lot of the ones that's not in the news. I know about the ones there in Texas. Look at what happened when there was a climate event in Texas recently. And not only did the people lose power, but I had people write me in San Antonio saying, Catherine, I know what you're talking about now because I can't flush my toilet. So I think that this is an opportunity to think out of the box so that I'm talking about young people, won't have to be, when you're sitting here judging this 20 years from now, we're going to be talking about something completely different. Personally, I like to retire sewers. Sewers are part of the environmental problems that we have. We got to come up with another way to do this. And I think we can do that. And we may already have some of the answers, but some people have been trained to do it a certain way and they don't want another answer because they feel like it's like the people going from the fossil fuel industry to renewable energy. They feel like, oh, I'm going to lose my job because that's all I know how to do. But I think that we're smart enough and resilient enough to change. I mean, it's like wearing masks. We never wore masks before, but we had to wear a mask in order to protect ourselves and protect people that were vulnerable. And likewise, we have to start thinking the same way when we talk about wastewater and the whole purpose of having sanitation in the first place, not just here, but around the world. And whatever solutions we come up with, if they work long-term is, are they going to fail in 3 or 4 years? Is the sewage going to come back into the home? Am I going to be able to go to the home where you put those systems in and test those families and find evidence of hookworm and tropical parasites? That should be the testament of whether or not the action that was taken was really working, or whether it was just a PR stunt that looked like you're doing something and to get the money because it's readily available right now.
That is really, really big stuff. Yeah, I can go back and forth. I don't want to hold you, but you bring up so many points that really strike a nerve, like, you know, thinking about the economic opportunities in the community that can often be cut off from a lot of these efforts. And it can unfortunately be an opportunity for economic gains for some people. And sometimes it's easier for them to put a Band-Aid on your gaping wound that'll allow them to have a steady flow of income than to totally fix things.
And we need to totally fix things, because at the end of the day, we're going to have more and more people dying. They're still having funerals in Lowndes County because of COVID. But I wonder how many people in Lowndes County and places like Lowndes County are vulnerable because of failing wastewater systems. And one thing about the people that are straight piping is not coming back into their homes. is generally being moved away from their homes. But if you put in place a failed treatment system and it comes back into their homes as well as outside, that's a problem. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And that's why we got to think bigger. And we got to, the solution is not putting in place a septic system. I'm getting calls every day about failing septic systems in Montgomery County. You know, and you can't use the same what they like to say in Lowndes County is go and say that, oh, it's because the people aren't educated. We're talking about middle-class people. Some of these people are elected officials that are living with failing septic systems. And in the town of Hayneville, where they've had sewage running, they built a sewage lagoon right next to a community that keeps overflowing. It's been on PBS and everything. Nothing has happened. Nobody talks about that. And then the same thing is in Whitehall, which is also in Lowndes County in the Black Belt. They're trying to put the same kind of, right next to a elementary school, they want to put a sewage lagoon. That makes no sense, but I see nobody speaking out against it, but everybody's running there to say, oh, we're gonna put in place these septic systems that we already know that are going to fail. But one of the things, I don't care how many NDAs people in Lowndes County and the Black Belt sign, when they fail, they're gonna be calling us and we're gonna go in with the press and expose it, because we're tired of seeing the same old issue over and over and over again. And I think we have an opportunity before us to find a real solution. But we can find the real solution by asking the right questions, and that's not going to happen if they're not willing to put in place. Everybody want to run because the money's available. If the money wasn't available, they'd be taking time to actually go from house to house and ask people what's really going on. But because the money is there and they want to spend that money while it's there, and then what's going to happen 5 years from now, when the next group of young people come through there and talk about this group that came in and exploited the situation instead of repaired the situation, we're going to see a real example of what environmental injustice looks like.
Such powerful stuff. Such powerful stuff. And I haven't made the announcement in the chat like I'd meant to. We might, and Brad, you can let me know what you think. I'm thinking we might have time for 2 more. I know Miss Flowers has to get on the road here soon. And so Christine gave me a message earlier, and so she didn't have her hand raised, but she wasn't able to raise it. But I wanted to give you a chance to ask your question, Christine, if you still are on and want to ask. Christine Dong.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Flowers, for speaking with us today. I think what really struck me about your story was the part about silencing voices. And my question for you pertains to this exactly. So in my community, the same thing is happening to marginalized groups, like the authorities aren't listening, and these kind of issues are being ignored. And my question is, how do you deal with the kind of people who sort of prevaricate or avoid this kind of issue? And what is your best advice to give for someone following the same path as you?
Well, I think one of the ways is to keep lifting up the voices is, first of all, find opportunities to get them, or you can write it for them, editorials, and start publishing them in newspapers. What I did, I had to actually bring people from the outside. That's been Alabama's history. I had to bring people from usually other areas who came in to see it firsthand and let them see it. So the people that were discounting, and I mean, there was even a group one time that said that our study was not valid because we used PCR technology, because they had never heard of it before, so they took an official position that it was invalid, and as a result, had got egg on their face. But now PCR, people talk about PCR technology all the time now because of COVID. So I think that that's one of the things you can do. And then also trying to get some outside help. If you reach out to me, I think I put it in the chat how I'm available. You reach out to me, give me more details about the issue that you're dealing with. I can probably connect you to people in your area that can help you lift up the voices of the people in your community, because I had to, the fact that I brought Al Gore to visit, Cory Booker came to visit, Jane Fonda came, those kinds of things help to, and Jane didn't go to see the politicians. She went to see the people living in the houses, the people in the community who had been crying out for a long time. And that helped to other people to start paying attention and to lift their voices. Where do you live? Where do you live?
I live in Hawaii.
Oh, wow. I got a lot of people in Hawaii I can put you in touch with. And I know that they have wastewater failures in Hawaii. Actually,
That is so awesome.
yeah, they have a lot of wastewater. Actually, when I went to the health department site there several months ago, the first thing they talked about was failing cesspools in Hawaii. So yes, please reach out to me, and I have a number of people that I can put you in touch with that are indigenous Hawaiians, as well as others that I know that are doing work around this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Will do.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. How valuable that is to have people to connect to. Because like Ms. Fowler says, lifting up the voices of the community is essentially what's brought out the book that you guys read, and what's brought up, the money that you see going into the Black Belt currently. That's all because of people lifting up their voices. And so important. I'm so glad you asked that questions and y'all are able to make that synergistic connection there. And so I'm excited to hear what happens there in Hawaii out of this conversation. And I think we will do one more. I'm really sorry. Ms. Flowers did add her contact information. If that's okay with you, Ms. Flowers.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do one more. I know, Charlotte, you've had your hand up for a while. And then anybody else, I'm sure there's a ton of questions.
And
reach out.
And if you cannot, my heart is with young people. So if for some reason that you cannot ask your question, please reach out to me and we can have a conversation through either Instagram. I know my daughter tells me only old people are on Facebook now, but that's why I have an Instagram account. So you can reach out to me through either Instagram or Twitter, and I will certainly respond to you and let me know that it's through this competition.
Perfect. So awesome. All right. So this is your time. Charlotte, go ahead and shoot.
Okay, my name is Charlotte Mitchell, and I'm from New Jersey, and I just wanted to thank you for coming today and speaking with us. I found it really inspirational that you were able to put yourself out there and really work hard to educate people on such a highly serious and significant issue. Could you talk about your experience founding the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice?
Yes, thank you. Well, initially we started off as the Alabama Center for Rural Enterprise, and our focus was just on Lowndes County. But as we found out that the problem was much, much larger, we decided that we would instead found the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice so we can work across the U.S. In addressing these issues. So basically what we did, we had a lot of support. I became a GRIS 50 fixer, and they, through some of our friendships and collaborations there, we were able to pull together the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice. And I've gotten a lot of help from organizations like the Solutions Project. And there are other groups that from around the country that think that this is a very important issue, and they reached out as well to help us. And the work that we're doing now, some of the boards that I serve on these boards because they've been very helpful. We've had people like, I keep mentioning the Climate Reality Project, which you're never too young to join that if you're interested in learning more about climate change and also environmental justice. But I've done a lot of work with them, and they helped us. They became our fiscal sponsor for a long time until we got up on our feet. The same thing is true for the now NRDC is providing a lot of help, and of course the Equal Justice Initiative. I couldn't do any of this without Brian Stevenson. Brian Stevenson himself grew up on a failing septic system. He wrote the foreword for my book. He's the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, which is located here in Montgomery, but the failing septic system that he grew up on was in Delaware. And he said every time his sister used the shower that they had to go and pump it. That sounds like Lowndes County. So it just illustrates that this issue is much broader. And most of the people that come to me, a lot of people that have been talking to me. I was on a panel with Duke University, with the Nicholas Institute and the Aspen Institute about a week or so ago. And one of the persons that I've been working with for a long time, he mentioned that he was from New Jersey, and his family, his parents they have a septic tank and a well. And I was wondering why he was so amenable to this, you know, the things that I was talking about and how he never explained to me before that he had personal experience and knew exactly what I was talking about. So a lot of people that have helped, some of them are people that were shocked because they, you know, just learned about this existing and didn't want it to exist in the US. And some of them have had personal experience. They don't want to expose their personal experience, but they would like to see a solution. And that's how we have founded CREEJ. And our board members include, from California, we have Kat Taylor, whose husband, Kat is a banker in her own right, but her husband is Tom Steyer, who ran for president. Kat came to Lowndes County. Of course, I mentioned Jane Fonda, who went with me to the Central Valley. Jane and Kat both went. We went to Allensworth and we saw the issue there. I have a local person who's a minister and originally from Lowndes County that's on our board, and I also serve on the board, and we're getting ready to expand our board to include people that are technical advisors. And one of the persons working with us now, he was not involved in the founding of CREEJ, but he was one of my students at Duke. His name is Brandon Hunter, who is now Dr. Brandon Hunter, who is doing his postdoc on the Cardiff Chandran at Columbia now. So, you know, it's all like a circular economy. We're coming full circle. But the founding was very easy. If you want to found any kind of organization, basically all you have to do is fill out the paperwork for a 501c3, keep it simple, find a board that supports your mission, develop your mission statements, bylaws, and that's how you get started and find some supporters. And that's how we got to this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much again. Like literally, I could have so many questions. I'm sure everybody else could have so many questions, but we really, really appreciate your time. As a personal note, I just got off of a call. I started on the Water Environment Federation. They're having a board. The Board of Trustees has a small communities task force that they recently started, and it's focused on a lot of the things that you talked about here and really wanting to. It's a lot of engineers and we recognize that. And so it's so valuable to have the different perspective. I'm like taking notes and trying to make sure that I'm able to share that back with the group. But yeah, this was just so valuable. We really appreciate you taking out the time. And with that, I guess I will go ahead and pass it over to Brad if he wants to kind of have some parting words and keep things rolling with you guys' events with the Stockholm Junior Water Prize event.
Thanks, Anniestacia. Thank you so much, Catherine, for being here and for hearing from our students and sharing your passion, your expertise, and this is just invaluable to us. So thank you so much.
And I want to give a shout out to the Water Environment Federation because I've been to your offices before, and from the very beginning, WEF was engaged and involved. And I know at one point, WEF had a curriculum that I was pushing that they would put in engineering schools. I think we need to go back and talk about that because a lot of engineering schools were not teaching people how to install or even design for on-site wastewater treatment. And that may be something to revisit. And this was being done, that was in the early 2000s when we were having those discussions. And I think we should go back to that again. And I'd like to, if those discussions do happen again, I'd like to be a part of it. Thank you.